turn to chapter 44, if you would. And this is our last Bible study of this season. And then we will pick back up after the holidays. So we are going to work our way through the end of Genesis. And we're going to get done today, even if it takes till next week. Okay. So just hang in there. I don't think we'll have any problem at all. Genesis 44. And but let me, if I could, review, and that's you see those first 3 points. This is what we talked about last week. So Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, went to Potiphar's house where he was a servant. Um, we have phones ringing everywhere today. I Somebody trying to get a hold of me and I don't know about it or what. But so he's no, it's all right. There've been lots of them. So he is sold into slavery and he works for Potiphar. Things are going well till Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him and then accuses him of trying to seduce her, and he is thrown into prison. There he just sits and nothing's happening until he gets to fellow prisoners, the baker and the butler, who both have dreams, and he interprets both of their dreams. For the butler, the dream interpretation was 3 more days, and then the king is going to reinstall you in your position. Please remember me, Joseph said, when you get there. God's going to bless you, but don't forget me. And then to the baker, who was very anxious to hear the interpretation of his dream until he heard the interpretation of his dream, he said, 3 more days, and Pharaoh's going to lift off your head and your life is going to be taken. And so both of those dreams came true. The butler is reinstated, and but he forgets Joseph. Forgets Joseph, that is, until a third dream shows up in the story, and that's the dream that Pharaoh has that nobody can interpret. And that's when the butler said, "Oh, yeah, there is this guy named Joseph. I remember him in jail now. I should have told you before, but he can interpret dreams." And so Joseph is brought up and he interprets the dream for Pharaoh. The dream, very simply, is there's going to be, there's actually two dreams. One dream, two pictures of that dream. But the interpretation is there's going to be 7 really good years, land of plenty, and then there's going to be 7 really bad years of famine. And so Joseph said, "My counsel to you is find somebody that you can put in charge that can gather a little bit of the food during the 7 good years, hold some of it back so there is plenty for everybody during the last 7 years." And the king says, Pharaoh says, "You know what? Somebody as wise as you're the guy. We put you in charge." And so Joseph is elevated now. So he has been in a pit. He's been in Potiphar's house. He's been in the prison, and now he is now in the palace. It's a 4 point key sermon that I just developed in my head. How about that? That's pretty good. Might use that on Sunday. All right. So that's a little insight into the way a preacher's head works. All right. That's just what happened. So he is now in the palace serving Pharaoh, and he is in charge of the food, 7 good years. Everything goes as planned. Then the 7 bad years start all the way back home. Now we go all the way back home to Canaan, and Jacob and his boys are starving too because nobody in Canaan knew that the famine was coming. So they haven't made any preparations and they're out of food. And Jacob says, "You know what? I hear that there is food in Egypt. Why don't you go there?" And so the boys headed that way, 10 of them. Of course, Benjamin was the youngest. He stayed at home. Jacob sent the other 10, and they show up. And here's the guy in charge who recognizes them. Joseph knows them, but they don't know it's Joseph. And so Joseph immediately recognizes them. He immediately has this light bulb go on. This is why God put me here. This is why I was in a pit and why I was in prison. And now I'm here to save my family. But in spite of that very spiritual moment, he also played with them for a while. And he said, "You all are spies, I'm sure." No, we're not spies. They tell their whole story. They spill their guts. Our dad's back home, and there's 10 of us, and there's a baby brother back home, and there's one of us that's already died, and we're not spies. We just need food for our dad and our family. No, you're spies. And he threw him in jail for 3 days. And then he finally said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you food, but we're going to keep one of you back. And so they kept Simeon back, and I'm going to give you food, and I want you to go home, and I want you, if you're not spies, bring me baby brother. I want to meet baby brother, and then I'll give you more food and everything will be good. So Simeon stays in jail. They go home. They tell dad, well, we left with 10. We got a lot of food, but there's only 9 because they left Simeon there. And they are asking, the guy in charge is asking to see Benjamin. And Jacob says, there's no way I'm letting Benjamin go. Sorry about Simeon's luck, but we are going to hang on to Benjamin. And Simeon's caused me a lot of heartache over the years anyway, so we'll let him go. But I'm going to hang on to Benjamin, and so that's all good and well until they run out of food again. And Jacob says, "Guys, go get some more food in Egypt." And Judah says, "Dad, they're not. He won't even listen to us unless we bring Benjamin." Jacob resists that. Judah says, "I'm not going unless Benjamin goes, but Dad, I promise you that I will make sure that he is cared for." And finally, Jacob relents and they go back with Benjamin. So they go back with Benjamin, and the one piece I left out of the story in my review, of course, is when they went back the first time, they had all their money still in their sacks and they were afraid that they had been, they would be accused of stealing. So they go back, and with Benjamin, Joseph sees them, and of course he's moved by that. They still don't know it's Joseph. He knows it's them, and he says to his servant, "Let's have a big dinner tonight. Let's pour out pull out all stops, and let's just really bless them." And of course, the Egyptians and the Hebrews can't eat together, so there's 2 big dinner tables. Joseph and his servants over here, and all the brothers over there. And Joseph tells the servant how to sit the boys at the table and sits them in birth order. And they're looking at each other like, how in the world did he know our birth order? And then they start feeding them food. And Benjamin gets 5 times what everybody else gets. And they all kind of look at each other like, this is strange. Remember, Benjamin is the son of Rachel, and Joseph is also the son of Rachel, and that's Jacob's beloved wife, and she is already passed. And so all of this dynamic is going on. They've had dinner, and now he's going to let Simeon go, and Benjamin, they're all going to get to go back, and Joseph uh, he prepares them to head back, and we get to chapter 44, and this is the new material now, but this was the end of last week's lesson. So I'm going to get it done, and then we'll start the clock for today's lesson. All right. So 44 verse 1. So he commanded the steward, said, fill the men's sacks with food as much as they can carry. Put each man's money in the mouth of his sack. So they did the same thing again. And then Benjamin said, also put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest. Put that in Benjamin's sack. Um, and his grain money. So they did according to the word that Joseph had spoken. And as soon as the morning dawned, the men were sent away, they and their donkeys. And so they take off, unbeknownst to them, the silver cup is in one of their sacks. When they'd gone out of the city and they were not yet far off, Joseph said to his steward, get up, follow the men. And when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is not, and by the way, that's going to be a theme. He's going to ask them, why have you repaid evil for good? And Joseph is going to say later, what you meant for evil, God has turned for good. So he's just asking him, I blessed you and you're stealing my cup. And so follow them and ask them that. Is not this the one from which my Lord Pharaoh drinks, and which he practices divination? You've done evil. So the steward overtakes them, verse 6, and he speaks to them these words. And they said to him, why does my Lord say these things? Far be it from us that we should do such a thing. Look, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan the money which we found in the mouth of our sacks. We haven't stolen anything. We brought that back. How would we then steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? And then there's this bold statement made, with whomever of your servants it is found, let him die, and we will become your slaves. So they said, we are so sure that we didn't take it. By the way, remember when Rachel took her dad's idols, kind of the same story. So they say, we are so sure we didn't take it. Wherever you find the cup, whoever took it, they can die, and the rest of us will become your slaves. And so, verse 10, okay, let it be according to your words, and with whom it shall be found will be my slave, and you'll be blameless. And each man speedily let down his sack to the ground, and each opened his sack. So he searched, and he began with his sack. So he searched, or excuse me, he began with the oldest and left off with the youngest, and the cup was found, whose sack? Benjamin's sack. And of course, they tear their clothes, and each man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. So you can imagine them going back to Egypt. They are as defeated could be. Um, 20 years of conflict is all balled up here, and it is going to be resolved, but they're not certain how it is going to get resolved. So we get back to the city, verse 14. I may not read all of this to you. It's lengthy, and but I want to at least get the gist of it, and I may end up reading it all. Judah and his brothers, they came to Joseph's house, and Joseph's still there. And they fall before him. Again, this is not the first time, but they fell before him on the ground. Remember the dream where they fall down before him. And Joseph said, what have you done? Didn't you know that somebody like me practiced divination? And Judah said, what shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? How can we clear ourselves? And here Judah makes this admission. God, he makes it right in front of Joseph. God has found out the iniquity of your servants. Here we are, my Lord's slaves, both we and he also, with whom the cup was found. Judah said, what goes around has come around, and we've been caught. Admits it to his brother, who he doesn't know is his brother. Far be it from me, he said, that I should um, do so. The man in whose hand the cup was found, he'll be my slave. And as for you, you can go to peace to your father. So Joseph says, no, we're not going to take all of you, but whoever we find, we'll take Benjamin. So then Judah came near to him. It's almost like Judah steps up to him. This is a one-on-one conversation. That's the sense you get. Judas comes near to Joseph, and I'm gonna read this fast, but it's pretty powerful. Um, my Lord, please let me speak a word in your hearing. Don't let your anger burn against your servant. We know that you're like Pharaoh. You're number two. My Lord asked his servant, saying, have you a father or a brother? And we said to my Lord, we do have a father, an old man, and a child of his old age who is young, and his brother is dead. And he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him. And you said to your servants, bring him down to me, and I may set my eyes on him. And we said to my Lord, lad can't leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die. But you said to your servants, unless your younger brother comes down with you, you shall see my face no more. You told us, unless we brought him, you wouldn't see us again. So it was when we went up to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord, and our father said, go back and buy us a little food. We said, we can't go down if our youngest brother is with us. Then we will go down, for we may not see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Then your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me two sons, and the one went out from me. And I said, surely he is torn to pieces, and I've not seen him since. But if you take this one also from me and calamity befalls him, you're going to bring down my gray hair with sorrow to the grave. Now, therefore, when I come to your servant, my father, and I don't have Benjamin with me, since his life is bound up in his life, it's going to happen when he sees that the lad is not with us, he'll die. So your servants are going to bring down the gray hair of your servant, our father, with sorrow to the grave. For your servant became surety. That's Judah speaking. I promised for the lad to my father, saying, if I don't bring him back to you, then I'll bear the blame for my father forever. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the lad as a slave to my Lord, and let the lad go up with his brothers. How shall I go up to my father if the lad is not with me, lest perhaps I see the evil that would come upon my father? Judah totally spills the beans here. We've got no excuse. How can I defend myself? And he gets Joseph in a corner and he says, listen, I'm going to tell you everything. I'm going to tell you everything I know. My dad, his heart was broken the day he lost Joseph, and he can't take another loss. And if we go home and Benjamin is not with us, my dad is going to die, and we can't let that happen. So please let me go instead. Judah is clearly changed here, clearly humbled. Into chapter 45, verse 1, Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by, and he cried out, make everyone go out of the room. So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers, and he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph is now so overcome with emotion that he is wailing. And Joseph says to his brothers, I'm Joseph. Is my dad still alive? His brothers couldn't answer him, for they're dismayed in his presence. I mean, they're dismayed, they're afraid, all those things. Um, and Joseph said to his brothers, please come near to me. So they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But don't be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years, the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing or harvesting. But God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Listen, AKA to preserve the seed. Those 70 get wiped out, there's no seed. Don't be angry with yourselves. You sold me into slavery, but God sent me here. And can I just say, oh, that we could learn to take our trials and say, instead of being angry and bitter, Satan, you may have meant that for evil, but God sent me here for a reason. That's how Christians are supposed to live their lives. That's how what is supposed to separate us from the world. We don't get angry and bitter. It doesn't mean it's easy and wonderful, but we say we believe that God orders our steps, and therefore we will trust him even when things are difficult. So it was not you who sent me here, verse 8, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and the Lord of all this house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. I'm not going to read you all the rest of this chapter because we do need to get through today. But Joseph, after that, says, go get my dad. I want to see him and bring him here to me. And in verse 16, look how generous Pharaoh is. The report of it comes to Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So please, Pharaoh and his servants. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart, go to the land of Canaan, bring your father and your households and come to me, and I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. And you are commanded to do this, take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives, bring your father and come, and don't be concerned about your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. Pharaoh said, bring them all here, and we're going to give them the best of the stuff. And in verse 21, the sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man, he gave them garments. Look, to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. And he sent to his father these things: 10 donkeys loaded with all the good things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys. Sent his brothers away And they departed, and they said to him, See to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. So he sends them off with all the stuff, all the wagons full of stuff, and go get my dad, bring him back. And in verse 25, I really love this text. They went up out of Egypt, they came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive. He is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart, watch this, stood still because he didn't believe them. Now let me just pause for a moment. So they get there and they say, Dad, he's still alive. He's in Egypt. And his heart wasn't moved. He just stood still because he did not believe them. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. And Israel said, It is enough. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. I don't want to overstretch this, but when Jacob, just hearing it, he didn't believe it. But when he saw the wagons and the provision, his spirit was revived. And there may be people that cerebrally will say, I don't believe in the resurrection. But when they see the blessing of a living Christ at work in people's lives, when they see the provision that God makes for them, when they experience the joy that God can provide, it revives the spirit. There's something about experiencing the living Christ that makes all the difference in the world. So Jacob is now going to go to the family and be reunited with them, chapter 46. So Israel, that's Jacob, took his journey with all that he had. So they load up everything, which isn't a lot. They came to Beersheba and they offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel, Jacob, in the visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, Here I am. And he said, I am the God of your father. Don't go down to Egypt, for I will make of you a great nation. I will go down with you um, to Egypt, and I will also surely bring you up again. I'm going to take you down there, but I'm going to bring you up again. Joseph will put his hand on your eyes. That's just a reference to your son Joseph that you thought was dead is going to be in the room when you die, and he's going to close your eyelids. That's what that is saying. He will put his hand on your eyes. And Jacob arose from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried their father, their little ones, and their wives in the carts which Pharaoh had sent to carry them, and they took their livestock, their goods that they had acquired in the land of Canaan. They went to Egypt. Jacob and all of his descendants went with him, his sons' sons, his daughters, and all of his descendants he brought with him to Egypt. So they leave and they head to Egypt. They stop and they make sacrifices. God says, I'm going to go with you and I'm going to accompany you all the way and I will bring you back. By the way, he will be brought back in a coffin, all right? His bones, Joseph will say, when I die, carry my bones back to Canaan. So God promises him, You're leaving when Jacob dies. Jacob, you're leaving, but I will bring you back. And Joseph is going to put his hand on your eyes at your death. So in chapter 46, verses 8 through 27, it lists all the family that goes to Egypt. Jump to verse 26 because those are just a bunch of names. Um, I know, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to skip the names. Go back and read them later, Rick. It'll give you great joy, okay? So, all the persons who went with Jacob to Egypt who came from his body, besides Jacob's sons' wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were two persons. All the persons of the house of Jacob who went to Egypt were 70. I want you to remember that. 70. They were 70 people away from the seed being gone that God had promised. We have been through Cain, Abel, Seth. We've been through Noah, down to Shem, down to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and now we've got 70. And if these 70 die, the promise of Genesis 3:15 that the seed of the woman will destroy your head is going to be destroyed. 70 people. That's how frail this group is. All right. And um, and then look at verses 28 through 30 of chapter 46. Then he sent Judah before him to Joseph to point out before him the way to Goshen. That's where they are allowed to go. He came to the land of Goshen. So Joseph made ready his chariot, and he went up to Goshen to meet his father Israel. And he presented himself to him, and he fell on his neck, and he wept on his neck a good while. Can you imagine that reunion? And Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I've seen your face, because you're still alive." What an amazing reunion. Now, we're going to move on to chapter 46, verse 31. Um, let me read 31 through 34. Joseph said to his brothers, to his father's household, "I'm going to go up to tell Pharaoh and say to him, my brothers and those of my father's house who were in the land of Canaan have come to me. And I'm going to tell him, this is what he's saying. I'm going to tell Pharaoh, I'm going to say the men are shepherds, for their occupation has been to feed livestock, and they have brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. So it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth, even till now, both we and our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians." All right, so Joseph gives them a little instruction here on how to speak the truth without divulging everything. All right. And they're doing better. They used to just flat out lie. Now they're just kind of stretching the truth. All right. They weren't looking for jobs or food. They just want land. And so Joseph wants his family to be honest, which is again not a past trait of Jacob, but he wants to keep his family separate. And this is really God ordained until the promise of the patriarchs is fulfilled. So we get to chapter 47, and the brothers look who's listening to who now. All right. Now Joseph's in charge, not the brothers. So Joseph went and he told Pharaoh and said, my father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. And indeed, they are in the land of Goshen. And he took 5 men from among his brothers, Pharaoh did, and Joseph did, and he presented them to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? All right. And they said to Pharaoh, your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. And they said to Pharaoh, we have come to dwell in the land because your servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now, therefore, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen. We'll stay away from you, the Egyptians, because you think shepherds are unclean. So they do exactly what Joseph tells them to do. And in verse 5 and 6, Pharaoh is very generous. Father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock. I'll even let your best guys come and work with my livestock. And then this is a really kind of cool passage. Then Joseph brought in his father Jacob, and he sets him before Pharaoh. So let me try to give you this. Jacob is a worn out old man. Seriously, he has lied. His life has been hard. He's lost a wife. He thought he lost a son. One of his sons has committed incest with one of his handmaids. His sons have done awful things to the people in Shechem. His life has been marred by confusion and dysfunction and mistakes. And you can just imagine he's old and haggard. I mean, he is tired and weary. And the the picture, the contrast is amazing. So Joseph brings Jacob in to meet Pharaoh. I mean, he's got his nails are neatly clipped. I'm sure he used lotion on his skin, and and he's in the best of garb, and he probably looks 10 years younger than he really is because he's pampered, and they're sitting there. You got old Jacob and you've got Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How old are you?" Now, I don't know the tone of voice. Like, how old are you? I don't we have no idea. I can't tell you that. And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage." What Jacob is saying, I didn't live to be as old as Abraham or Isaac, but my days are hard. So you almost get the sense that Pharaoh is saying, "How old are you?" Like, man, you look rough, You never want to say that, to somebody or have that said. By the way, if you're on Facebook and if you're friends with Elizabeth Saylor, um, they have a little boy, Amos, their little boy, is the one that always said he wanted a Pastor Kevin haircut. I have no idea why, but his younger brother George got the scissors and cut his own hair yesterday, and cut right down the middle. And when they asked him who he looked like, he said Pastor Kevin. All right, so I can kind of I can kind of picture myself in front of Pharaoh, him saying, "How old are you?" Um, that's what's going on here. All right. Um, and Jacob, this is really powerful. He blessed Pharaoh, spoke blessing over Pharaoh, ungodly king, and he went out from before Pharaoh. Pharaoh situated, and Joseph situated his father and his brothers, gave them possession of the land of Egypt, the best of the land. And Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with bread, according to the number in their families. Verse 13. I'm not gonna read all of this text because it can kind of get into the weeds here, but in verses 13 through 26, it really just simply talks about how Joseph administrates the land. This is a little clip of, now remember, Joseph's in charge of managing the food. And so he kind of talks about how he does that. The only ones not affected are Israel and Jacob's family and the priest. And actually, Joseph is related to the priest by marriage. Remember, he married the the daughter of the priest, and he is related to Israel, obviously, Jacob by blood. And the people rejoice in Joseph's administration of the land. They are happy with their administrator because he's kept them all eating through this horrific famine. In verse 27 now, so we're in chapter 47 and verse 27. Um, Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there. They grew and they multiplied exceedingly. Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So now, after the time that Jacob goes there, old and haggard, he lives 17 more years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Now I have found favor in your sight. Please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." Remember, God said, "I'll bring you back." And then he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself at the head of the bed. So Jacob spent 17 years there under Jacob's. He spent first 17 years. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Joseph spent 17 years under Jacob's care. All right, remember that? He's 17 years old when he gets sold. Jacob now lives 17 years under Joseph's care in Egypt. And Joseph makes this promise to Jacob, I will get you back home where you want to be. That's where you will be buried. Get to chapter 48, and this is really moving text, all of it. And I'll probably read most of these last three chapters. We'll move quickly. Verse 1 and 2, it came to pass after these things that Joseph was told, indeed, your father is sick. And he took with him his two sons. Remember, he had two sons, Manasseh, which means the Lord has caused me to forget, and Ephraim, the Lord has made me fruitful in my land of affliction. But Joseph takes his two sons, and Jacob was told, look, your son Joseph is coming to you. And so Israel, Jacob strengthened himself and he sat up on the bed. Joseph is coming with two of Jacob's grandsons. And so he straightens himself on the bed. In verse 3, Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me and said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and multiply. I will make of you a multitude of people and give this land to your descendants after you as an everlasting possession. And now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. He's saying here, I'm going to take Manasseh and Ephraim and I'm going to adopt them as mine. They are going to get full rights into the inheritance. So it's not that's why there's not, when the 12 tribes of Israel are listed, there's not a tribe of Joseph. There is a tribe of Manasseh and a tribe of Ephraim. They are going to be adopted in. All right. So he tells Joseph that. Um, your offspring, whom you beget after them, shall be yours. They'll be called by the name of their brothers in their inheritance. But as for me, when I came from Padan, Rachel died beside me in the land of Canaan on the way, and there was but a little distance to go to Ephrath, and I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. Then Israel saw Joseph's sons and said, who are these? Joseph said to his father, they are my sons, whom God has given me in this place. And he said, please bring them to me, and I will bless them. The eyes of Israel, Jacob, are dim with age, so they couldn't see. So Joseph brought them near him, and he kissed them and he embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I had not thought to see your face, but in fact, God has also shown me your offspring. Just a quick little word. Even even God in the Old Testament was able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ever think or ask. Jacob says, I didn't even think I'd see you again, and now I get to see your sons, right? So Joseph brought them from beside his knees, and he bowed down with his face to the earth. And Joseph then took them both, Ephraim with his right hand toward Israel's, Jacob's left hand, and Manasseh with his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near to him because he couldn't see. Then Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, guiding his hands knowingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac walked, the God who has fed me all the day of my life, lifelong to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from evil, bless the lads. Let my name be named upon them and the name of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Um, when Joseph saw that his father had laid his right hand on the head of Ephraim, it displeased him. So he took hold of his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, "Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put your right hand on his head." But his father refused. "I know, my son, I know. He shall also become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations." So he blessed them that day, saying, Israel will bless, by you, Israel will bless, saying, "May God make you as Ephraim and as Manasseh." And thus he said Ephraim before Manasseh. So this is kind of an interesting little twist that should not be surprising. I mean, not in this story, all right? We have Esau's the oldest, but Jacob gets it. We have Ishmael, who's the oldest, but Isaac's the one that is the blessing. And same thing happens here. And then Jacob will give a final blessing to Joseph in verse 21. Israel said to Joseph, "Behold, I'm dying. God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to you one portion above your brothers, which I took from the hand of the Amorite with my sword and my bow." And then chapter 49, so he tells him, you got extra, you got both sons. Um, chapter 49, he says, Jacob calls all of his sons and gather together that I may tell you what shall befall you in the last days. Gather together and hear, you sons of Jacob, and listen to Israel, your father. I'm just going to read through this, make a few comments. But now we have Joseph's already been blessed. His two sons have been blessed. All right. So now there's 11 other sons that are going to be recipients of blessing here. All right. And they start with the firstborn Reuben. And you are my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity and the excellency of power. Unstable as water, you shall not excel, because you went up to your father's bed. That he's the one that slept with the handmaid. Then you defiled it. He went up to my couch. Now, we think of blessing as just all good stuff. I want to I want to go beyond that. This is prophetic. It's more than just I bless you with good things. He's speaking prophetically into these boys' lives. Reuben will have a difficult time because Reuben was so unfaithful. Again, a reminder, be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. With that, I mean, may I say this? We try to bring human equity into the equation, and there'll be some places where, I mean, Judah did horrific things, and it's from his line that the Messiah comes. At the end of the day, equity aside, God is still sovereign, and God chooses to do so. Even though there is this principle that what we sow we're going to reap, that doesn't make us we are not those who pull the strings of the marionette puppet and think, I put in this, I get out this. We can't ever remove the sovereignty of God from the equation either. So you see that at work here. But Reuben certainly is going to reap what Reuben has sown. Simeon and Levi, verse 5, they're brothers. Levi will not have a territory, all right? That's why both Ephraim and Manasseh will get a territory. From Levi come the priests, and they will spread out over the entire land. So there is no land allotment to Levi. And again, that's why Ephraim and Manasseh um, get full allotments of land. So Simeon and Levi are brothers. Instruments of cruelty are in their dwelling place. Let not my soul enter their council. Let not my honor be united to their assembly. For in their anger they slew a man, and in their self will they hamstrung an ox. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. The cruelty has to do most likely with the Shechem massacre when they, had all the Shechemites circumcised, and then when they were sore, they killed them, and so they're going to be paid back for that as well. Um, just it's pretty obvious, but this isn't one of those deals where Reuben went in and got his blessing and came out and said, "Man, Simeon and Levi, get on in there. This is good stuff." It didn't work like that. Simeon went out with his head down, and Simeon and Levi come out with their tail wagging behind them as well. All right. Now it's Judah's turn, verse 8. Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. Judah is Yada. Hebrew means praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Remember, it's from his lineage comes the Messiah who will crush the head of Satan. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion who shall rouse him. The scepter, that's royalty, shall not depart from Judah. It will always be in the line of Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes, pointing likely a reference to the Messiah. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, binding his donkey to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Again, if this was a in-depth study, we would take each of these and explain them in detail, but you can see references with the donkey and you can see references with the blood. You see pictures of the Messiah and Christ certainly in Judah as well. So he is blessed with the rewards of wisdom and kingship and dominion, and eternality and prosperity. His sin with Tamar is overlooked. He did repent. Plus, he went to bat for his dad and promised the safety of Benjamin. The brothers shall praise you. I've already said Judah means praised. Hand on the neck speaks of conquest. Lion's whelp is majestic and powerful. Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah. Scepter speaks of kingship. Donkey was the ride of the chief person or king. And in Zechariah, Jesus is prophesied, the Messiah is prophesied to ride in on a donkey. And the wine speaks of prosperity. And of course, blood. We know about that in the covenant. And then when Jesus returns, his robe will be dipped in blood. Revelation 19. So Judah is spoken over prophetically as well. Verse 13, Zebulun shall dwell by the haven of the sea. He shall become a haven for ships, and his borders shall adjoin Sidon. Zebulun is actually the sixth son of Leah, but he's listed before Issachar, the fifth son, which gives him some preeminence. Zebulun by the seashore may refer to the Sea of Galilee. That would have been the area that he would have been in. And then Issachar, again inverted, he was the fifth. Verse 14 and 15, he's a strong donkey lying down between two burdens. He saw that rest was good and that land was pleasant. He bowed his shoulder to bear a burden and became a band of slaves. Now, the thing about Issachar is though he is strong, he is stubborn. He stubbornly refuses to work. He's lazy. And it may be the reason that Zebulun is noted before him. Um, Though most of their land is fertile, they will become slaves later on in the story to the Canaanites simply because he will be unwilling to exert the strength that he has. So again, his father is speaking prophetically over him. Then we get, those were the sons of Leah, verse 6. And now we go to the sons of the two handmaids, Bilhah and Zilpah, verse 16 through 21. Dan shall judge his people as one of the tribes of Israel. And the Danites were the judges. Um, Gad, verse 17, Dan shall be a serpent by the way, a viper by the path that bites the horse's heels, so that its rider shall fall backward. I have waited for your salvation, O Lord. All of that speaks of executing justice by pleading, but not by condemning. Gad, in verse 19, a troop shall tramp upon him. He shall triumph at last. He will have attacks by the Ammonites, the Moabites, and the Arameans. Later on, that's the Syrians, but he will fight back their attacks. Asher, in verse number 20, bread from Asher shall be rich. He shall yield royal dainties, fertile land. Naphtali, verse 21, is a deer let loose. He uses beautiful words. And then finally, we get to the two sons of Rachel. Joseph's already received a little blessing from his father, but now that is expanded. Joseph is a fruitful bough by a well. His branches run over the wall. The archers have bitterly grieved him, shot at him, and hated him. That pictures his life. They tried to kill him, thrown in prison, but his bow remained in strength. The arm of his hands were made strong by the hands of the mighty God of Jacob. From there is the shepherd of the stone of Israel, by the God of your father who will help you, and by the Almighty who will bless you with blessings of heaven above, blessings of the deep that lies beneath, blessings of the breasts and of the womb. The blessings of your father have excelled the blessings of my ancestors up to the utmost bound of the everlasting hills. They shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of him who was separate from his brothers. So he grabs the whole life story of Joseph as he speaks prophetically over him. And and then Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he shall devour the prey, and at night he shall divide the spoil. Benjamin's tribe has a reputation for skill and bravery in war. The first king, Saul, was a Benjamite. And then from that point on, the throne runs through David and the tribe of Judah. Verse 29, then he charged them. Wait, verse 28, all these are the 12 tribes of Israel. This is what their father spoke to them, and he blessed them. He blessed each one according to his own blessing. And then he charged them and said to them, I am to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as possession for a burial place. There they buried Abraham and Sarah, his wife. There they buried Isaac and Rebekah, his wife. And there I buried Leah. Field and the cave that is there were purchased from the sons of Heth. And when Jacob had finished commanding his sons, he drew up his feet into the bed, and he breathed his last and was gathered to his people. So Jacob dies, and we read about his death. And now we get to chapter 50. And Joseph fell on his father's face, and he wept over him, and he kissed him. Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for him, for such are the days required for those who are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, if I've now found favor in your eyes, please speak in the hearing of Pharaoh, saying, my father made me swear, saying, behold, I'm dying in my grave, which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. There you shall bury me. Now, therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, and I will come back. And Pharaoh said, go and bury your father, as he's made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, went with him, and with him went all of the servants of Pharaoh. The elders of the house, the elders of the land of Egypt, as well as the house of Joseph, his brother, and his father's house, only their little ones, their flocks, and their herds they left in Goshen. And there with went up with them both chariots and horsemen, and it was a great gathering. They came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, and they mourned there with a great, very solemn lamentation. He observed 7 days of mourning for his father. When the inhabitants of the land, Canaanites, saw the mourning of the threshing floor of Atad, they said, there is deep mourning of the Egyptians. Therefore, its name was called Abel Mizram, which is beyond the Jordan. So his sons did for him, that's for Jacob, just as had commanded them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan, buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah, before Mamre, which Abraham bought field from Ephron the Hittite, his property for a burial place. And after he'd buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers and all who went up with him to bury his father. So they knew, uh, Jacob knew that Joseph would carry out his wishes, and indeed Joseph carried them out. The end of the story gets a little bit interesting and fun. In verse 15, when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead. Okay, now the funeral's over. It's been a while. There was mourning and embalming and a journey, and now they're all back home. And now dad's out of the picture. So you can imagine boys are thinking, surely we're not getting away scot free here. So when Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, perhaps Joseph will hate us, and he may actually repay us for all the evil which we did to him. So they sent messengers to Joseph, saying, before your father died, he commanded, saying, thus you shall say to Joseph, I beg you, please forgive the trespass of your brothers and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Um, they knew that they would have the best chance if they could somehow get words into the mouth of the dead Jacob. All right. So Jacob's not there to verify. It's most likely that they fabricated this story. Um, and they're pretty good at fabricating anyway. They've done this all their lives. And so they say to Joseph, hey, you probably want to know, Dad called us aside and Dad told us. You ever have people tell you that the Holy Spirit told them to tell you? That's what's, yeah, they're saying, Dad, I know you can't verify this because he's already gone, but Dad told us that when he died, you are supposed to forgive us, right? Um, but Joseph was a godly man, and he wept um, when they said that. And his brothers even went and fell down before his face. Now they're begging. Okay, they have a lie, and now they're begging. Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. This is something every Christian ought to say when they want to be bitter. Am I in the place of God? Joseph is saying, who am I to judge you? Don't you think every Christian ought to live their life that way? Who am I to judge you? Who am I to hold unforgiveness against you? I'm not God. And Joseph said, who am I? Am I in the place of God? As for you, yeah, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about, as it is this day, to save many people alive. In other words, Joseph is saying, do you not realize, had you not done, I know you meant it for evil. I'm not saying your motives were good, but I'm just saying that God superintended your motives, and God needed me here to save your lives and our family's life. And so don't be angry and don't be afraid, because what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Now, therefore, don't be afraid. I'm going to provide for you and your little ones. And he comforted them and he spoke kindly to them. Can I just again pause for just a second and say how a Christian can read this story and feel like they are in any way vindicated to hold a grudge against anyone is absolutely beyond me. There's just no place for it. None of us have been hurt like Joseph was hurt. And Joseph didn't say, okay, I'll forgive you, but I'd really keep your distance. He said, I'm going to take care of you and I'm going to take care of your children. That's why he's a powerful picture, typology of Jesus. I mean, while we were still sinners, he died for us. Looked at the executors. Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. So, verse 23, Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's household. Joseph lived 110 years. He saw Ephraim's children to the third generation. Children of Mashur, the son of Manasseh, were also brought up on Joseph's knees. In other words, he got to be a grandparent. Joseph said to his brethren, I'm dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land, and the land of which he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph took an oath from the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and you will carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Now, I want you to just turn the page to Exodus 1. I want to read you just the first 8 verses. So this is the end of the Genesis story. Joseph dies. He's got a couple of generations, all right, of grandkids, which Joseph's way down in the birth order. So you can imagine how many Simeon and Reuben and Levi, and we're talking now, this number has grown quite a bit. And we get to verse 1 of Exodus, and this is where we're going to pick up when we pick back up. These are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt. Each man in his household came with Jacob: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All those who were descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, for Joseph was in Egypt already. And Joseph died, all his brothers, and all that generation. But the children of Israel were fruitful. They're in Egypt now. And they increased abundantly. They multiplied. And they grew exceedingly mighty, to the land being filled with them. From 70 to the land being filled with them. Verse 8, but there arose a new king over Egypt who didn't know Joseph and didn't care about Joseph. And he's the one that's going to ramp up slavery, and that will lead to God's redemption in the Exodus. It's a great, great story. But I feel like if you have been in these sessions and you didn't know it before, we all should have a pretty good grasp of this story up to this point. And one more time, all of this to protect and preserve the seed that was promised to destroy the enemy, promised in Genesis 3:15.